Hey everybody, what's up? I'm Will. This is Origami Cybertruck. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I see as Tesla's fundamental competitive moat. And that is the ability to clearly see the present and see into the future. Now, I know that sounds maybe a little bit obvious, but I want to kind of dive into this because I think it's actually super important to what makes Tesla a special case in the electric vehicle market, the autonomous market, and the mobility market overall. Now, what is a competitive moat? Number one, just in case you're not aware of that, a competitive moat is something we refer to when we're talking about kind of a unique ability that a company has to prevent other companies from kind of coming in on their market share or what have you. All right, so this is something they can do uniquely better than anyone else can, and it prevents other people from being able to duplicate their efforts, right? So for some companies, a competitive moat might be like intellectual property, like patents and things like that. But that's not the case really with Tesla because, they've open sourced all their other patents to anybody who wants to use them in good faith. Tesla is likely, in my opinion, to run away with the lion's share of the profits in the EV market and the automotive market in general within only a few years from now. And the reason I think that is not because I think Tesla is necessarily going to make more vehicles than anybody else or everybody else, but like Apple does in the smartphone industry, I think that Tesla has the chance to be the it company when it comes to the vehicles that people are really going to want as we move forward. Like Apple in the smartphone industry, they only make a small percentage of the phones worldwide, but they take home 80 to 90% of the profits of smartphones that are sold. I think that Tesla has a really good shot of doing the same thing in the vehicle space. All right. Tesla Motors was founded in 2003 with a simple but powerful idea that electric vehicles could finally be cost competitive in at least one market segment. That market segment, of course, was high-end, low-volume, high-performance electric vehicles. This was somewhere that the inherent advantages of electric motors and electric propulsion could really compete head-to-head with kind of like high cost, low production gasoline cars. So they created the original Tesla Roadster, which was a AC induction motor powered electric vehicle on a body built by Lotus. It was a Lotus Elise chassis. And they basically made a little sports car. They only created a few thousand of these in the entire run that they created, but it was basically a proof of concept. Now, people sometimes give Tesla a hard time because, they criticize saying, it's just a car for rich people, the Model S, the Model X, the Roadster, these are just like fancy luxury products that aren't really going to change the world. But starting with the Roadster actually made a lot of sense because it was the place where electric vehicles made sense in the market at the time, given the cost of batteries. Now, battery prices were falling already, but they hadn't yet gotten to the point where they were ready for price-wise for the mass market. But Tesla saw this more clearly than everybody else. And instead of trying to take expensive batteries and put them into some kind of economy car for like green people or, whatever, making these weird assumptions, Tesla saw clearly where it made sense at that moment and used that to their advantage. Now, if we look back at the secret master plan that Elon Musk wrote in 2006, you can still find it on Tesla's blog today. And that was 1, build a sports car. Use the money from that to build an affordable car. Use that money to build an even more affordable car. While doing so, provide zero-emission electric power generation options. So the plan has always been to use economies of scale to drive down the cost, to kind of step onto that train as it was leaving the station and not be too early or too late. Since Tesla had clearly seen the present, it made it a lot easier to look into the future. So they fit their plans of electrification to where the price and the technology was at the time. And as they've done it, they've been extremely strategic about matching their ambitions with what is possible today. Once they were able to do that, the rest of it is just execution. Now, I don't want to minimize that because the world is littered with failed vehicle startups. So Tesla had to have something so powerful, a competitive advantage so powerful that it would allow them to overcome the inherent difficulties of creating a new automotive manufacturing operation from scratch, all right, and be able to compete with these low margin, high volume companies like GM, Toyota, Ford, Volkswagen, all these people. So what kind of competitive advantage do they have? Well, basically, they have a crystal ball. They have the ability to see where they are today and allow them to project into the future. And while it sounds very simple, this is actually incredibly unusual for companies these days. Today, Tesla finds himself in a world where other automakers who are trying to compete in the EV space are just playing catch up or copycat, or, they're basically not competing at all. Maybe they're making compliance vehicles, a car effort that, an electric vehicle effort where they're sort of trying, but not really. Like, they don't really want to sell that many. They just need to, hit some sort of standards or whatever. I actually feel sorry for traditional automakers in a lot of ways. I mean, they've built, this huge business model around, a big manufacturing stack of outsourced internal combustion engine technology, right? And they've built all of this infrastructure, which is, engine plants and, all this kind of intellectual property that's basically worthless in the future. I mean, yeah, they can stamp out a lot of body panels or whatever really quickly, but that's, not that hard to do. They find themselves without any particular advantages. In fact, a lot of disadvantages. A lot of the traditional auto manufacturers have an even bigger problem, and that is the fact that they are low profit, high volume, high fixed cost, high infrastructure cost operations, and in the world of electric vehicles, none of that stuff is going to be helpful to them at all. So these economies of scale about building, millions of gas engines or diesel engines is totally worthless. And that's one of the biggest value adds that these manufacturers have today in the internal combustion engine space with each other. Add to that everybody sees auto manufacturing as kind of a stable industry, as a mature industry. So the shareholders and the corporate boards, they expect to see profits, and they expect to see, some consistent, reliable profitability every year for these traditional automakers. But this is exactly the time when automakers need to face the reality that they're going to have to put in a bunch of upfront costs, even more than usual, to learn how to build and scale electric vehicle and battery manufacturing. And right now, nobody else is really doing it. I mean, we've heard some people talk, GM about building a battery factory, VW says that they're going to, but they're like kind of the exceptions. And the battery factories they're proposing are not even really all that big. Here's another problem that the traditional auto manufacturers have, at least in the United States. They're saddled with these old-fashioned dealer networks. Now, these dealer networks make their money on not selling cars typically, but on service. Now, electric vehicles need a lot less service than a gas-powered vehicle does. They don't need oil changes. They don't need fluids changed. There's less things moving around, less things to break. These guys are not incentivized to actually sell EVs and really push them, because that actually goes against their own profit motives. As an example of this, for their Ford Mustang Mach-E, Ford has recently resorted to basically bribing dealerships to, sell the Mach-E at the list price to people who, gave Ford $250 as a reservation, because Ford doesn't control those dealerships. They are kind of just hoping that the dealers will sell the Mach-E for what Ford says it should be sold for. But they can't directly enforce that. All they can do is kind of like cajole and bribe the dealerships to do that. We'll see if that's effective, but fundamentally, you're dealing with, thousands of independently owned businesses that control how your product is sold if you're Ford or if you're GM. So what should the traditional auto manufacturers do? Their hands are tied in so many ways, it's kind of hard to see how a lot of them are going to survive the disruption that's taking place right now. I don't have a good answer for this, and I'm glad I'm not an automotive CEO today. I guess if I were in their shoes, I would, hope that sales don't fall too much, that I don't have to write down too many fixed assets, that, the value of all this intellectual property in gas and diesel engines doesn't become too worthless too quickly, and that, hopefully I can, boost the stock price a little bit, try to juice sales enough before I leave and move to a different industry that I'm not remembered as the one who, led a major auto manufacturer into bankruptcy. I really think that that's where a lot of this is headed, and I do not envy the people who are, the people who are trying to lead these companies through this, because they're really on a knife's edge between needing to participate in this disruptive force and having that disruption imperil the rest of their business. In other words, I guess I'd be doing what the automotive CEOs are all doing right now, hoping that things don't get too bad before I can leave the scene. But anyway, let's bring this back to Tesla, okay? Tesla has charted a really clear course that takes into account where battery prices are today, where the battery technology is today, where everything is today and in the near future. And they're sticking to that roadmap and just executing. Now, sometimes we hear about things like the Tesla Semi. Oh, it was supposed to come out in 2019. Well, 2019's over and there aren't any Tesla Semis except the 2 test mules out on the road. But I don't think it's because Tesla can't build the Semi or whatever. I think the Semi is actually going to be fairly easy for them to build. I think what it is they just don't have enough batteries at the right price point yet, so they're not ready to execute on that part of the roadmap. They will be soon enough, maybe that's later in 2020, maybe that's early 2021. As they ramp that semi-truck up, the volume of batteries is going to increase, the cost is going to come down because of manufacturing economies of scale, and that piece of the roadmap will fall into place, just as has the S, the X, Model 3, Model Y. All of those things were the right product in the right segment at the right time to match what was actually going on. And that's something that we don't see with these other people who are building EVs today. Look at the Nissan Leaf, all right? It was like, what is this thing? It's an economy vehicle, kind of. So they had to scrimp on all these battery management capabilities. There's no active cooling or heating of the batteries. So if you live in a cold place or a hot place, your range is going to be terrible, or your life of your batteries is going to be terrible. And as a result, Nissan Leafs have a horrible resale value because basically they're only useful in somewhere with a Mediterranean climate. And otherwise you have huge battery degradation problems. All right. So it was like the wrong product fit at the wrong time. They kind of blew it. Same thing with the Chevy Bolt. Again, it's sort of this weird economy car thing, but it's kind of expensive. It's, less performance than a Model 3 base model, but kind of similar price range. So who's this appealing to, and what is it doing? It just kind of doesn't make any sense. But with Tesla, instead of just kind of pivoting wildly, when they if they release a product and it kind of doesn't work, like what GM is doing, they release the Bolt, it sort of doesn't work. So now they're I don't know, maybe we'll make electric Hummers. just pivoting wildly, instead of doing that, Tesla is able to have that roadmap, stick to it, follow it, and then when there is some other kind of thing that they learn about, they're able to add that, not just wildly pivot in the wind. So here's an example. As far as I can tell, in 2003, when Tesla was founded, autonomous driving wasn't on anyone's radar at Tesla, at least not in a serious way. Like, they were just trying to get the Roadster designed and built and out the door to customers. So it wasn't until the Model S came along, which was originally released in 2012 without any kind of autonomous driving, that they started to look forward to adding autonomy. The Model S was upgraded in 2014 to include Autopilot version 1.0. It was a essentially off-the-shelf solution provided by an Israeli company called Mobileye, and it just used a single forward-facing camera to do basic lane keeping and traffic-aware cruise control. All right. They ditched that 2 years later for their own software, their own sensor suite of 8 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors, and 1 forward-facing radar. They used an NVIDIA chip as the computer, and that was Autopilot 2.0. But even at that time, they were already planning for the next step. By 2019, Tesla had designed, created, and started implementing their own custom neural net accelerator computer in all of their production vehicles. This is something that no other car manufacturer has done and probably is even capable of doing. Crucially, that computer is backwards compatible with all the Teslas that had been built and released since 2016. So all of those vehicles can be upgraded. I mean, that's the kind of forward thinking and roadmap planning that Tesla is capable of doing, and that is their moat. So, in summary, their ability to see the present, project it to the future, and take advantage of changes to technology as they come up, because they can see them so clearly, is an enduring competitive moat for Tesla that I don't see going away anytime soon. All right. Thanks for watching. I'd love to know what everybody thinks. Please leave a comment below. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up button. Really appreciate it.